Good morning and welcome to Tuesday Holy Week. I guess many of us have one day a week that is particularly busy. Maybe because, for some of you farmers it's market day and you have to get stock prepared and transported and then spend hours chatting and looking over stock but there's all that preparation and travelling plus the usual farm jobs that have to be done. Maybe have one day where you're running around taking the children to clubs and activities. Or perhaps, for us who are pastors, it's Sunday, the only day we work, according to some people. This week we're following Mark's detailed account of Holy Week, and if you go by Mark's account of Holy Week, Tuesday was probably Jesus' busiest day that week. Mark devotes 115 verses from chapter 11 verse 27 through to chapter 13 verse 37 to Tuesday, almost twice as many verses as Thursday, the next busiest day. Mark starts by concluding the story of the fig tree, which we covered yesterday, early on the Tuesday morning. After that, Mark tells us Jesus and his disciples again entered Jerusalem. And then we have teaching on various topics, and we have confrontation with and questions from the authorities. We haven't time today to go through all 115 verses in detail, but I would like to pick out a couple of highlights, a couple of key points. Jesus entering the city on Palm Sunday was a provocation to the Roman authorities. Jesus' actions in the temple on Monday were a provocation to those collaborating with the Romans, the Jewish authorities, those who were not being fruitful and were denying justice to the ordinary people. Tuesday presents Jesus as once more coming into conflict with the powers that be, the domination systems, the Roman authorities supported by the chief priests and other Jewish leaders. We have demands by the leading priests, rabbis and elders to tell them on whose authority Jesus was doing the things he was doing. And this presumably is a reference to his actions in the temple the previous day. We have the Pharisees and supporters of King Herod sent by the leaders, Mark says, to try to trip Jesus up by asking questions about paying taxes to Caesar. I'm sure you're familiar with the account. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? They ask a loaded question. Whose image is on the coin, Jesus says. Caesar's, they reply. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God, Jesus says. We have questions from the Sadducees, another religious grouping, about the resurrection. Another trick question. The Sadducees, unlike the Pharisees, didn't believe in resurrection. Jesus skillfully answers in a way that makes the Sadducees probably look a bit silly. We have too a question from a teacher, a rabbi, about which is the greatest commandment. And Jesus offering two: love God with everything you have and everything you are. And secondly, love your neighbour as you love yourself. Questions answered by Jesus with great wisdom and great skill, genius, we might say. And questions answered so cleverly as to not give those in authority the evidence they were looking for to have Jesus arrested. Also on Tuesday, we have Jesus teaching about the evil farmers, who the leaders realised was a perhaps not too subtle reference to them, leading to the religious leaders wanting again to arrest Jesus, but being afraid that doing so will cause a riot. And we have Jesus teaching about the future. Mark records Jesus' lengthy teaching about what's going to happen. It's not easy to tell exactly what Jesus was talking about. Was he talking about the end of the world? Was he talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple? Perhaps both. This passage has been referred to as the little apocalypse, which might suggest the end of the world, but as we've seen, as we've looked at the book of Revelation, apocalypse means revealing. Jesus says no one knows when the things that he was describing would happen. But he also says there's an opportunity to witness, to tell people about Jesus. And Jesus, in that teaching, also promises that his words will never pass away. His words, his teaching are good for all time and perhaps beyond time. There's some great encouragement in that passage in Mark 13 for how we can respond to difficult times and difficult circumstances. So again, well worth reading through at your leisure. At the end of a long Tuesday, Jesus had probably further upset and frustrated his opponents. He had, in effect, questioned their authority as they had questioned his. He had subtly criticised them, and he'd answered their questions in ways that must have frustrated them and made it difficult for them to silence him, to do away with him. As we come up against the domination systems, the powers that be which attempt to oppress us, to deny us justice, to dominate us, we can confront them directly, or we can use wisdom, skill, and knowledge of Scripture, all things given by God and all things used by Jesus to speak truth to power and to declare God's rule and reign, his kingdom, present here on earth as in heaven, during this present crisis and beyond. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll be able to join me tomorrow for a brief look at the events of Wednesday of Holy Week. May God bless you and make me a blessing to others.